Let's go, IC people. I'm I'm so excited to have Rick Porter on here with us. So, Rick is founder of Discover. Pretty much the coolest decentralized social platform out there. Rick, how are you doing today? Oh, Rick. Oh,
Oh yeah, there we go. There we go.
there we
No,
go.
yeah, I can. Dude, we're fucking killing it here, dude. Loving it. Things have been good, and dude, I think there's so much to discuss. I feel like it's been a while since I've actually talked about Discover publicly, but dude, the team has been crazy heads down. Everybody has been burning the midnight oil super hard lately. I think we've been just like feature for the past 6 months, man. It's been like
Yeah.
it's been insanity, absolute insanity. Like I think our I think we're pushing out like 20 20 feature. Like feel like maybe like 10 features every 2 weeks, like right now. Like really core features. Been completely rebuilding everything we know about our front end and back end during this bear market. And that's the cool thing about bear markets, man. Like
Time
no
to
one's
build.
looking, so you can make a ton of mistakes. And dude, we've broken some things, but we've also like drastically improved things. I think this next bull market is going to be a huge paradigm shift for us.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think if there's anything that everyone knows about your team is that you pump out features like crazy every single time. I talk to you, your platform looks different in a good way, and we always, for those who don't know, Rick is always out there. He's always going places, flying all over to different events, and so if you're going to go anywhere and within like a Web3 IC type event, Rick's probably going to be there having really interesting conversations with people. So yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this. It's always great to connect with you. And speaking of like, just because of the nature of Discover and how y'all pump out features so quickly, I think we're going to change this show up a little bit. So normally we'll do a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll show that kind of builds up the energy to get to the recording. We watch that, and then we have a live Q&A with the audience after that from the YouTube comments. But because of just like all the different types of updates going on, I think it'd be better to just go straight into your recording, and that way everybody has the context. Like that's where you were in May, and then like even in your recording, you're talking about stuff that's going to come out in a week or two that's already come out now.
Yeah, dude, I'm
Yeah,
interested to hear. Like, let's see how well I predicted the release of some of these features. But
so yeah, and
let's see.
and then with this, we're going to a few questions on like stuff that's changed after. I think it'd be easier to keep track of because yeah, your platform moves so much. So yeah, sound good to you? That work?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, everybody. This is Rick's presentation at the May conference for the ICP Community Conference. Let's go.
Please welcome Rick Porter from Discover to the stage.
Hey, so how's it going, everybody? I'm Rick Porter. I'm running Discover. I'm one of the co-founders. I am the CEO and founder too. We believe crypto and social. So the intersection of crypto and social is Discover. We're trying to bridge that gap between crypto and social through our current platform. And this is a place where people can go and interact with different types of tokens, especially NFTs and fungible tokens. We have token tipping, NFT gated communities, and all sorts of different ways to interact with these tokens. And so here's some of the high levels. We have airdrops, NFT profile pics, fungible tipping, and NFT gating. NFT gating is most likely one of our most used features. So it's very common that someone actually comes to us and says, hey, I have a new NFT collection. I want to get it on the platform as quick as possible. How do I set up a gate? And gating has become such a requested feature that we now have like trait gates or specific types of token IDs will get specific types of roles. Fungible tipping, that kind of had a weird start. I think we started off with like, was it Ghost Token was the first tippable token? And like instantly it was a lot of fun, but it was like a dust, let's be real. It ended up being dust, but it was still fun. It was like a super like, right? Like really the value is I'm so excited about this. I want to transfer a little bit of value more than an upvote. And then we started adding ICRC token tipping. ICRC token tipping, I think, is going to be something that we see progress a lot further than what it is. Like right now, it's cool, you know, you tip the token, but I think there's a lot deeper game that we haven't even explored with tipping and more ways to transfer value. NFT profile pics, you know, we did the verification, and that was kind of just like random. You know, we're just like, you know, it would be interesting. We just put a gold circle around it and we could confirm that they actually owned it. It is probably one of the more difficult features out of all of these to actually maintain, especially with gating, because you have to have the actual token inside of the canister. So the canister has to be aware of the registries of all the NFT collections. So our canisters have a duplicate of all the registries of all the NFT collections. And I think we're at like 700 or 800 different NFTs on the IC right now. And Discover monitors all 800 or 700 of them. And the exchanges have been great. You know, working with EXT has been incredibly easy, especially through Entrepot. And so if you are launching a collection, usually it's the easiest for us if it's an EXT token. And obviously, we're known for the airdrops. I don't even know how many airdrops we've had so far. There's probably been like 30 or 40 of them just in the last like 6 or 7 months. And people are always like, why didn't I get this? And honestly, you just got to be active. You've got to be participating in the site, got to be making sure you're having quality conversations. Ranking for us is super important, understanding how the user is producing quality content for the platform. Tokenized communities, this is something that we're starting to get really close to. We really want to inspire people to create a community and form a DAO around it and allow them to develop a token that is earned through that community. And our original architecture, we were like, oh man, we have to make so many modifications to the canister. Does the canister have to be owned by the portal, or does the user own the canister? How does the token work? And we finally took a step back and realized we have to present a new concept of how we think about developing applications for the internet computer. And again, like all these things are possible because of the internet computer. Like you don't have to sign a transaction to upvote. You don't have to sign a transaction to comment, but everything is, you have to sign these transactions, but you don't have to click a button, right? You don't have to load up MetaMask and confirm this transaction. Things just happen. And to us, that has created that paradigm where the user definitely feels like they're using that Web2 application. But going back to it, token-based roles and giving that financial power to the community themselves. To us, we think that's going to be a really challenging moment to make that shift. But I think as community members are developing the tools, and I think I've already talked to a couple people here who are creating the DAO technology, to me the ideal scenario would be that we can simply plug into that existing infrastructure that people are setting up and allow those communities to leverage that same DAO through the portal itself and allow all the proposals and portal management and DAO management happen through that portal itself. This is something it's going to be interesting. We want this idea of putting like a smart contract in a post. So you've developed a canister on the IC, and let's say it's a simple swap, right? You want to swap tokens. Wouldn't it be more interesting if you could, embed that into a post, an application into a post? And we experimented with this very early on with a game called Portal Hunt, and people had to answer. We presented a puzzle, and people had to solve the puzzle and input something into a form on a post. Well, we were like, that form should be an app, and anyone should be able to do that. So they should be able to come to Discover, like the platform, leverage the distribution of the platform, and actually embed these kind of apps into the posts. So we're very close to getting the MVP out, but I do think it's going to be a while before we actually figure out what is the exact protocol that we want to create to actually allow people to leverage the ability to put apps within side posts. So there's a lot of development happening, especially with what we saw with Plug in their conversation earlier of how are they going to get apps within inside of Plug? And I think we're asking a similar question: what kind of apps do people want to put into posts? And as you can imagine, it is a social platform, so I'm guessing there's going to be some pretty crazy apps that people build and want to embed. So we have to buckle up for that one. And the Social Fabric API is something that's getting also very close. We want the discover.js or the open up our interface and allow anybody to start building applications on top of our current social graph. But like, we had to take a huge step back at the beginning of this year. And like, how do we offer a social graph that anybody can query and anyone can build on top of? And we think that's going to be a pretty big lift that's about to be revealed very, very soon. And of course, the Discover Arcade. We've been working with a couple gaming companies who are building applications on the IC, like Fayfolk, and figuring out different ways that we can build their like help them build an application that fits within inside of the Discover Arcade. And that could be as simple as, you know, your profile that is on Fayfolk and all the characters that you've built up somehow are embedded into the portal that you're using for Fayfolk or you're using for that game to kind of have that seamless experience between, okay, here's the arcade and here's the user. We're expecting to see something like that in the next couple weeks. And there's a lot more. There's guilds. Like, wouldn't it be great if you could actually use the portal technology to establish a guild? And like, abstractly, Discover has all these really primitive social components, right? You have portals, which have content, which these contents have comments, and really it's just content is posts and comments, right? So you end up with this hierarchy. So how do we further develop out that hierarchy? And we have a developer who likes to think of everything as a folder. And so it's like, if we were to put folders within inside of folders, what would that look like? And then what kind of roles are required to access this? So we have full role-based access control in Discover, which gives you that ability to have really granular control on permissions within inside of these communities. So we're trying to work with those primitives to develop some of these components here to make it so that users can start developing applications within inside of Discover. So this next part is a little spicy, but it's like, one of the issues that we've been looking at with Discover was how do we scale to hundreds, millions of users and hopefully hundreds of millions of users while providing the same experience? And we realized that we needed to do a lot of things that would allow us to compete with Web 2 applications while still remaining a Web 3 application and still remaining, still using the IC. So you still using the Internet Computers technology. And we were like, we need composite queries, custom transformations, edge services, unlimited instructions, unlimited payload size. I did caveat that with what is scientifically currently possible. I do know that's been thrown around quite a bit. Multi-canister, multi-subnet queries within 50 milliseconds. So if I have data across multiple canisters, across multiple subnets, how do I quickly query that into and retrieve it from all the canisters, verify the data, and display it to the users within 50 milliseconds, which would be the expectations. And canister mirror state validation. So how do we mirror the state within inside of our edge network onto the canisters? And so we call this the Discover Edge. And the Discover Edge, some architecture right here. And so we have our canister 1 and 2 on the internet computer. We're able to mirror those canisters, validate the state of those canisters, and deploy them directly to our edge. And the edge works as an ingress and egress. So instead, typically you have your HTTP agent, you might point it to ICP0.app. Here you just point it to edge.discover.1. And this will handle all the necessary components to validate the message by verifying the signature and passing it through the edge network and onto the IC. Note that the edge network is read-only, so you're not like writing data to the edge network. You're writing data directly to the IC. Canisters are still completely accessible from the internet. So it's like this is not some sort of barrier to entry. If people want to directly connect to our canisters, they can still. But this just allows us to do certain things, which I'm going to talk about right now. And this to us is this enterprise-grade Web3 social, right? So high level, we need news feeds. News feeds are abstractly, a feed is a search engine, right? It's displaying results relative to your historical interactions. So this is the technology that's helped us going to do this. We're going to be able to leverage things like our social graph, our asset graph, and possibly use robust feed algorithms to actually display relative content to the users themselves. And so this is hopefully going to help us scale with our users. Because one of the problems that we face is, combating bots and things like that on networks is whack-a-mole. You ban one bot, you're probably creating 2 or 3 more. But in reality, bots have a specific way of interacting with users. And if you look at someone's social graph and you really put it up there and you look at it, the bots actually have no real impact to that user. They're a nuisance for sure, but their ability to manipulate feeds actually doesn't matter if you take into account the value of someone's feed relative to their social graph. So this is another reason why we need to build this technology, is we need to be able to access robust feed algorithms to do that. Intelligent notifications, right? Like a notification isn't just like, hey, you got a message, let's get it. You got to start like grouping notifications. You got to time notifications. You got to figure out when what is their time zone, so they're not like getting notifications at 2 or 3 in the morning. They're getting them through their day, right? How do you actually build email retention, right? Like how do you retarget? That's kind of one of the problems with Discover that we have right now, is how do we retarget our users? Anyone who comes to Discover right now, like literally has memorized the domain, or they see us on Twitter. Given our growth and our current retention, it's almost absurd to think about where we're at without any kind of these mechanics in place, right? So that means that like users actually want to seek out Discover, they want to seek out the feed, and they want to seek out the community that's there. So we want to give Discover that real opportunity with really intelligent notifications. Messaging, like how do people live communicate, right? Like we talked to OpenChat about possibly embedding OpenChat into Discover. That's definitely a possibility. There's other messaging apps that we've been talking to too that want to embed the ability to have kind of like that troll box or that live messaging with inside of Discover to kind of create that communication. But we think we can also leverage our edge network to do things like that. Still writing everything to chain, right? Partnership integrations. Like, we had some influencers speaking earlier, Blockchain Boy, right? And the amount of partnership integrations that they benefit from using things like TikTok or YouTube and those kind of programs that are in place that actually help with distribution with influencers is something that Discover needs to also. I have a whole theory on influencers, but like to me, Discover has to create its own influencers for it to be successful and independent. When you're working with influencers, how do you move their audience, right? Well, how do you develop an audience? So we need to build the right tools on Discover for an influencer to actually build out and retarget their own audience. And make it portable too. Like how do you actually develop a portable audience that they can build on Discover and possibly move to other platforms? And again, live communication. We have something like live spaces that Twitter uses rolling out relatively soon. We've actually been using it for our Discover like internal communication. So we have like this weekly meeting and we all jump in there and make up fake usernames and try to guess who each other are and things like that. But we think that live spaces will be one of those features that allows the users to kind of really break down those barriers and have more of develop out an audience, but also work with the community closely. And long term, we're really focused on this open SocialFi API. So it's like right now we're on Discover. And we have like all the wallet integrations, the feed algorithms, the stores, the posts, the profiles, and the feeds. But how do we actually make it so if you want to develop your own Discover, how do you leverage our current API? And going back to the edge, we really think that's going to be possible. We think that now we'll be able to develop these really robust algorithms that anyone can tweak. Like these algorithms, the new technology that's going to power them, anybody can go in there and be like, you know what? I do like the way that Discover is doing this algorithm, but I'd prefer a TikTok style algorithm, more of a for you, where I only find my followers on my follow feed, but my for you is really for discovery, right? And those are just graph search algorithms, right? With highly enriched data. Like TikTok's got like super enriched data, but how do we do that in a healthy way? And we want to expose all these same tools to people that actually want to build some sort of new ecosystem app on top of Discover. Multi-chain's been super important to us. We've been working closely with Tonik's team and understanding where they're going with BTC ordinals, NFT gating, and verified PFPs. We've been working with various APIs to actually allow you to, pair your wallet with a MetaMask or pair your wallet with other types of wallet providers to bring in your Arbitrum wallet, your Polygon wallet, your Ethereum wallet, or your Optimus wallet, and actually bring those onto Discover, pair them, and allow the users to actually create gated communities abstractly around all these different types of NFTs and collections, and also have verified PFPs. And we're probably looking at launching that relatively soon as we get this architecture out. And by the way, the Edge service right now is completely running. If you go to discover.one right now, you load up the feed. The feed is actually rendering right from the Edge, and you'll feel that response time. But going back to this, we have the ability now to start providing this kind of gating for the users, right? We'll be able to bring in things like Snapshot, and they'll be able to abstractly have information about their DAO and their proposals on their snapshot.org account, from their snapshot.org setup onto Discover inside of a portal. And we're definitely looking at other chains. I think given the fact that, you know, you have Bitfinity, who's very close to their EVM integration, and we think this is a good opportunity for us to kind of meet them in the middle to provide the kind of gating technology that these communities might actually need. Of course, here's the founders, me, Juan, and Alex. We have various backgrounds, but we've come together. We've been working together for, wow, I think like 4 years now. I've known Alex for like 6 or 7, but it's been quite the journey. I don't think some of the things that we were thinking when we first started of how robust and how different things would be at this point in time, but it's been definitely an interesting journey. And of course, here's who's invested into us. We have Polychain upfront, BDMI, Tomahawk, thank you very much. Shima and Firefly, also thank you very much. So yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
All right. Oh man, that was a good one. Yeah, no, I think you had one of the best stage presences at the conference. It's clear that you do a lot of public speaking and everything, but really the content, I think, is what excited everybody. I think that was really like a lot of energetic conversations about what you presented at the conference right after that.
Yeah, dude, it was great, and it was funny seeing some of that. I mean, like, notifications really, a couple things really got me. Feed algorithms, like, dude, we spent a lot of time with feed algorithms still to this point. I don't know how many beta users are in this channel right now, but if you're a beta user, you're most likely toying with the feed algorithms or looking at the feed algorithms right now. For you has kind of been that paradigm that we've been pushing, and it's really just been trying to figure out, like, how do we surface your social graph so it doesn't get buried? How do we sample and how do we surface a couple dimensions away from your own social graph? And it's kind of interesting because, like, there's everyone follows Discover team, so it typically dominates the feed. So we're like, oh shit, how do we now we gotta look, which makes sense because you follow it and then your entire social graph follows it. So we're like, okay, let's figure it out. Let's continue to tweak there. But it's enough to like make your feed significantly better. And we still have more tweaks that we're gonna do to it, but it's all parameterized. So we have all these levers, so we can just adjust the levers. We very rarely, and sometimes we add things to the algorithm, but it's becoming less and less. It's more of just tweaking these inputs. Notifications too. I don't know if you're a beta user. Let me look. It's been, I was just like, I'm actually literally looking at a screen right now for like notifications, the next iteration of it. Yeah, so if you're a beta user, you have notifications, and it doesn't have grouping, but it has notifications. And the next iteration we're rolling out is grouping. Grouping is one thing we learned about notifications is done correctly. It is literally just as complex as a feed on Discover.
Yeah. Well, like Web3 as an industry is really crap at notifications. So like it makes sense that this would be a key struggle, right? And it's one of the legs up that Web2 has. We really like Web3 will not reach mass adoption until our applications are competitive with the value proposition of Web2. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I've been really looking for, especially for an ICP ecosystem, is like someone who gets notifications right, and that's a huge struggle. I mean, like where would you say you are with that? Like I haven't logged in a couple of weeks, so.
Yeah, we've basically created all our notification types. And now it's like we're pumping all the notifications to the users, and we knew exactly what would happen. Power users are going to be flooded with like all sorts of different types of notifications. And now it's going back to those notifications and figuring out how to correctly group them together, which is like at first was like, just group them together. But it's actually kind of more complex than just grouping them together because it's actually time based. So when is the last time you've read your notifications relative to the next notification grouping?
Yeah.
But also, if you get a lot of notifications, there's also a little bit of priority. Like, what types of notifications are more important to a user based off of how often they're actually reading them and tapping into them. So we're like, okay, let's take our time with it. We very rarely get the opportunity to do a feature completely right. So I'm like looking at the screens for the next version of it, where more grouping is starting to take place. And I think it's like really getting there. But it's been technical lift. It was huge. Notifications almost sparked the edge. Feed algorithms and notifications almost sparked the edge.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it seemed like it almost required you creating a new technology.
Yep. Oh, dude, 100%. Like, how do you have them timely? How do you have them robust enough? And it really it's really been shaping social fabric, which is that underlying protocol that powers Discover. And like thinking social fabric, like thinking about how we separate those infrastructure and the technology has really shaped both of them. Like one of them is shaping the protocol and the other is shaping the technology that powers Discover. Like, yeah, you have the protocol and that's something we want to open up and give to people. But like social networks are so much more than just posts and like a database of posts and comments, or, a canister of posts and comments. It's so much more than that, like infinitely more than that. And to give the users a quality experience that they're going to enjoy, it's going to be more than that. And I spend almost all my time in Web3 social. Really enjoy, and I suggest people check them out. I suggest people spend time in Web3 social too. I think like there's IC Web3 social, which is very, very infinitely different than outside of IC Web3 social. And yeah, we could argue like who's more decentralized or who's more on chain, but like it doesn't help because those users don't care. What people care about is like why are they using Web3 social and what platforms? And like an interesting example of one that has been really popular recently is friend.tech, right? And I'm sure if I don't know how the hype is over, the hype train for it over, but it was very interesting for a moment in time. It was very similar to BitClout, right? It was a reinvention of BitClout, which is an older social network. And I think we're going to see more paradigms about that. But basically, FriendTech was gating. Basically, you can buy into somebody and receive their gated content. It's something like Patreon or OnlyFans. But like first person in pays like $1, second person in pays $2. Last person in is paying like thousands of dollars. Well, this won't last, but in theory, right? But the cool thing is that person who bought in for the $1 can now exit for the thousands of dollars because they got in early. Yeah, I mean, you're like, well, I think I've heard of this. Isn't this a Ponzi scheme? But like, we're gonna probably see a lot more iterations on Web3 social in this next bull run. And Discover, from a technology perspective, we're super excited about this. Like for us, it's about opening up our API and making it really being like, here's social fabric. Anyone can tap into it. But like that library, that JS library, that Python library that we want to develop, it needs to be immaculate. It needs to be like create a developer experience that's intuitive and allows them to kind of go in any direction. So we've been kind of boiling the ocean on this API over time. But I do think like this API, like eventually people will build their own Discovers. But I do think like the conversation of with inside Discover still has yet to be explored. Really has yet to be explored. And I do think that there'll be micro apps created, but I'm not sure. Like, I think people will be building their own social applications on top of our API, but I do want to make sure it allows them to develop very rich experiences with inside of all these micro applications built. And I have a different perspective on relative to other Web3 socials on how we want to achieve that relative to how I believe the developer and user experience is going to be. But I do think obviously opening it up and allowing people to build on top of it is going to be the way.
Yeah, I always, this is gonna be super nerdy, but I like to watch Star Trek. I like to talk about social network because it seems almost like this company starts out as, and then this like turns into this non-corporeal, bigger than itself thing. Like and you know, those in Star Trek, there's episodes where like go from physical to like an energy being or whatever. Like becoming a startup that grows into like this protocol becomes more than itself. I think that's really interesting. We can get deeper in that, but like going back to the Friends Tech thing, I think, it's great seeing that kind of experimentation because it kind of adds something to the landscape of social as a whole. And like, it'll take time for the majority of web users to deeply care about things like decentralization and privacy. I think we're still in that shift. It could take years and years before the majority of web users will join a platform just because it's more decentralized than the alternative. And so like, how does that shape your go-to-market strategy, right? Like in kind of providing a utility that's beyond just this rally cry that not everyone's into yet.
You know, if you look at Friend Tech, it had a lot of alpha signals on why a lot of things we did for Discover and Tagger, or maybe not Tagger, but maybe definitely District, maybe Open Chat, like things that they've done to make the onboarding experience simple. And did you sign up for Friends Tech?
No, I didn't personally, but yeah.
Also, I'm going to send you an invite code. Just do it. I'll send you some base tokens too, because it's fucking annoying to switch from Ethereum to base. But, I want people to go through that experience because you're going to be like, wow, this is literally like the IC. Like they use a library called Privacy. It's not IC like privacy, but like, and it basically generates a non-custodial wallet based off of your Google Auth or something, Twitter Auth, maybe Google Auth too, a phone number. And then it shares that private key. I think it's SSS technique, shared secrets, right? To the user with their browser. And so the user transfers tokens to this friends.tech. And then now those tokens exist inside of the friend.tech app. And they're interacting with the user, they're interacting with the friend.tech app, signing transactions, but like almost automatically they have to tap a button, but their MetaMask doesn't pop up. All these things don't pop up. So that's how they kind of presented the gasless experience to the user.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so that you have to fuel the app, but like to interact with it, you have to like spend tokens. And that feels similar to like how Tagger was at one point. I haven't used it in a while, but I do remember at one point, like there was a cost mechanic to upvoting.
Yeah, you have to like fuel it, and then you go allowed to post after you fuel it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's like comments or they had it's a chat room that you would go into and you could post photos, and that was free, and that was definitely like not on chain, but like the app was labeled as like 100% on chain, Web3 experience and things like that, and like the onboarding of the users was really successful. Like you saw a lot of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people join it, tons of transactions. I think it was all of Base's huge chunk of Base's transactions for a while. It's definitely teetered off, and almost all my friend.tech followers have like completely fallen in price. But it still was super interesting experience to see what would happen if you could give users the Web3 experience or a Web2 experience that felt like Web3, or vice versa. Web3 experience that felt like Web2.
Web3 can turn things into markets. So it turns like my understanding is it turned your follower base almost into like a market, like following different people, right? And that's an experiment that really can't be done properly on Web2. So it's Web3 showing that it can add something, right? By making something that normally wouldn't be a market. Yep. But yeah, so like how does that shape your go-to-market strategy for Discover? So like to add a value proposition, because if you want to reach mass scale before the mass web of users are like going to dApps because they're more decentralizing alternatives. Like before that shift's really going to happen in over years and years, or maybe
Yeah,
a decade.
So for us, it's been like there's our DTM's really been based around step one is like, how do we solve the identity problem and simplify the identity problem, right? We did a lot of research on like, why do people sign up for things, especially in Web3, and like, where is the trust mechanic, and like custodial versus non-custodial, and what do users actually care about? Like, almost you pull 1,000 users, and almost like all of them Web3 users, you're going to see, do you want to self-sovereign data? Oh yeah, definitely, I want that. Okay, click this button and remember this to and if you lose this, by the way, you're completely fucked. But click this and you're self-sovereign, or skip it. And almost like I would say like 90% are going to skip it. Like they're just like, ooh, I don't know, maybe even more than that. But they love the option. They love the capability of being able to take control of their own identity and data. And I think like for us, it's about providing a more robust experience for the user to allow them to do that, like to come on board, to onboard onto Discover. But like for us, the onboarding experience needs to be for the user who optionally wants self-sovereign data, to onboard within 3 seconds. Like, I think internet identity was a marvel. It was a marvel when it was released. It was very impressive. I remember sitting through multiple pitches, even in the last year, by other protocols, having them tell me, we've invented something, you won't believe it. And then they show us something that's like internet identity, and you're like, oh dude, that's cool, but like kind of saw it 2 years ago. But it's still impressive, still super impressive. But like, we're like, we got to go with 3 seconds. How do you get a user from 0 to hero fucking 3 seconds? And the next step too is like onboarding flows. Like, how, like, we're a social network. We need to know a little bit about the user. Like, how do we help them design their onboarding experience? And then how does that address their social graph? Like, how does that address their interests? So we're really starting off with the beginning of the user journey, and really trying to curate an experience relative to them. And like, we've gotten enough data and growth at this point where it's like, okay, we can pretty much, there's enough of like things around here that we could curate current portals, and give the users that experience that they need when they first onboard. And like, we do recognize that there's a small percent of your typical user are content creators. Large percent are content consumers. So it's like, how do you balance out creator consumer? How are you onboarding each one of them in a way that they're able to, you have enough audience for a creator to get consumed? And that's a super difficult question. That's even true for fucking, not only content creators, but like developers. Like, how do we have enough users on the app that when we do have an API that they're developing for a wide enough audience to make it viable for them to continue to do this? And like, you see this through all protocols too. Like, if the protocol hasn't created enough following, if the protocol hasn't grown to a total value stored is not great enough, you're not going to consume enough users, developers, to create an experience for the users that are actually on the application. So that's kind of where we're at right now. It's like, okay, let's really mass onboard those users by creating a more seamless Web3 experience, but still giving them access to the tokens, still giving them access to the assets, which to us is super important. Like, assets have to flow like a hurricane for Discover to be truly successful. Like, you have to come on, have this experience, and being truly unlocking access into Web3 by the click of a button, and access more of a multi-chain experience. Like, even in this chat room right now, like, how many people in here would actually like want to have more of a multi-chain lifestyle, right? Like, but it's daunting. Like,
I don't think multi-chain is the feature. It's just the reality. Like, like nobody signed on because they wanted a bunch of chains, right? We signed on for the dream of what Web3 paints. I'm gonna go a little off script because I have some questions planned, but
go ahead.
With my team, I've been doing some some kind of like long-term planning. I got this book Traction here next to me. This is a great book for a lot of those out there, and it talks about like defining the purpose or cause of your venture in kind of one sentence, and in such a way that it's not like easy to tell what your business does by the sentence that you come up with, but it's like the purpose for being. And the way I would phrase it to our leads of the different ventures was like, if you devoted 5 years of your life to building this, at the end of it, when you exit, if you're successful, like what do you want to feel like was accomplished and like added to the world because of this effort put here? So like, what would be that for you with Discover? Like, what's the kind of the purpose or cause or the thing that you would be proud to walk away from, when you eventually do exit?
Dude, it's been a big question of like how to get there. And for me, it's really packaging up the social graph, pushing it off into the ether, and having something that people just can't like remove. It's like really actually figuring out how to decentralize the data storage of the asset, of the content, of the users, of the posts themselves. How is that going to be achieved is being a big question. Is it a token? I really hope not.
I mean, that's the how, but like the why, like why?
Oh, why?
Decentralized social graph. I mean, I see the value. I'm curious as to how you would articulate it, right? Because that's kind of like behind this energy that we're all seeing with how you're able to iterate and we're able to push. So like defining that, I think would be it'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's a good question. When I see whys, when I see that pushed, when that graph is pushed out into the ether, I see an ability for hopefully a healthy way of people to communicate freely and put their messaging out in a safe and in a safe way that gives them ownership over their own digital and social presence. I think right now we're going to see an incredible amount of manipulation of our social footprint, our digital footprints over time. The transparency of Twitter's algorithm has been magnificent. Yeah, good for our X. And as X continues to provide that transparency behind their algorithm, I think people should take a deeper look into actually they're being transparent, which is great, but we don't know the inputs. We don't know all the inputs of the algorithm. We just know the algorithm itself. But that type of transparency needs to continue. And how do we give people the ability to still have a voice in a world where the algorithm themselves are going to most likely mute their voice relative to the platform? And that's the platform itself. That's Twitter, or X, and that's their right. That's they own they own X. They can publish. They develop the application. But how do we build a way so that when people are publishing to the social graph, there's the ability for anybody to publish to the social graph, freely publish to the social graph, but it's up to the applications on how they consume it and display it. And does this create a situation where we have more complex social bubbles? Very curious. We all experience the Facebook revelation of oh shit, we're all in a bubble and everything I'm seeing in my feed is actually not how the general US consensus thinks. It's actually how Facebook believes, I think, relative to the people I stop scrolling on and I upvote, which whatever, that's their thing. Most likely some product manager was optimizing, right?
Yeah.
But how do we actually, and for me, it's how do I actually develop something that allows people to still have that voice, but put it up to the applications themselves to actually publish, how to put it up to the applications themselves to actually give that person the voice. But it still allows them to have it. It still allows them to publish it to some sort of social graph. And it still allows that potential for somebody to find it. It's to me, at least have a message in a bottle, if you can't even have a message at all.
Yeah. In a way, I see it as the ultimate open internet service, because you have your physical life where you kind of have custodianship of that, but then you have your digital life that really has superpowers compared to what you're able to do in the physical world. but you've got these centralized custodians that kind of harvest and control and manipulate. And to be able to have something that's owned by like to have the same autonomy you have in the real world, but in your digital life, that's something that's I think is going to be powerful, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it is. We live in a like your digital, even building on that, your digital identity is so powerful. You like you can have as many of them, thousands of them instantly, thousands of your own voices. You can create your own echo chamber with the push of a button. It's like truly magnificent.
Yeah, I mean, we think of human rights are typically things that affect the physical world, but like they need to start extending to the digital world, because it's a big part of modern life is the digital world. Increasingly, like you can't get a job and like doing a lot of normal things without access to the internet, and as that becomes more of a human right, we need these open internet services to protect that from all the private interests out there. So we got 15 minutes left roughly. Let's get to some questions from the audience here. So we got Jimmy. He's saying, what's the concept of social fabric in the context of Web3 social networks? And we've talked about it a little bit, so maybe it'd be good to just review. And then like, I guess he says, how does it differ from traditional social networks? So
yeah, social fabric is the upcoming protocol that'll be powering Discover. Whether the name changes or not, I don't know, but I've always liked social fabric.
I like fabric.
Yeah. And the idea is it kind of weaves together the social graph, which is powering other social platforms, and the hope is that through this open and decentralized protocol, social fabric, anybody will be able to build an application on top of it and tap into the current users that are already using that social graph. And like we're moving towards an omni social graph future, and a multi social graph future, but like social fabric will be one of those, and our hope is that anybody can tap into it and build applications on top of it, as we are building Discover on top of it.
Yeah, and kind of for context for those out there, so Facebook has like it's called social graph for them, right? And like if you're building a website or whatever, when you share URLs on social, you see like different parameters coming up and popping up automatically. There's a lot of things that use it behind the scenes, but having a decentralized version of that would be like this social building block that any other dApp could plug into, that protects users' rights and all that kind of good stuff. So I hope that summary was good for everybody. And then we've got a question here. Would it be possible to adapt like existing applications within social fabric? I'm wondering if he's talking about, this is from Pablo. I'm wondering if he's talking about like Web2 applications, or maybe that would be curious to ask. So like once the social fabric exists, like what part might Web2 play in that?
Yeah, I think so. Like I believe our API, the protocol that we've developed for social fabric, is abstract and robust enough to create just about anything. There's one last huge piece to this puzzle. We're still figuring that one out. It'll take us a while we've seen nobody do it. And it really has to do with privacy. That's the last big piece. And I know there's a technique out there to do it, but as soon as we figure this one out, I think it's fully marching forward. And privacy is important for so many reasons. But I do believe that we'll be able to provide an adequate enough protocol to build, as long as we continue with the architecture and principles that we are on. Like I'm trying to think of what you can't build. That's what my mind is trying to think of right now. And I know like one or two, there's like one thing, the privacy based ones is we can't figure out, but mostly because we're not putting our 100% attention to it. But as soon as we figure that out, I think you can create pretty much anything. Yeah.
In privacy, I mean, there's a technical component, but there's also just like, there's that pragmatic balance between like the whole point of a social platform is to increase reach, right? And you've got like the reach and accessibility, the fact that you'll always be able to copy any type of media on the normal web.
Like when you look at Patreon and OnlyFans, though, like although it is about reach, the content is about exclusivity.
Exactly, right? So there's that's a really interesting interplay, right?
Cool.
And a question here from James, are there video chat call opportunities, features on Discover?
Discover? Yeah, we have Discover Live. I can't remember when our official release date is. Everything, we have this huge release coming up in October. End of October is probably our biggest, possibly one of our biggest releases we've ever done.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, super under wraps. Like, I think we have a daily call literally about this upcoming release, but like we have Discover Live and it's functional. We're wanting to roll it out. I always never we have a beta site, beta.discover.one, and trying to think of a portal, but like I'm pretty sure. Damn, it's just like it's so interesting coming to the site sometimes, and you're like, damn, they're like really pumping out features. It's we have I've never been more privileged in my life of working with a team in my career. So there goes that. And they really think about some of these problems too. So sometimes I'm on the site and I'm like, oh damn, that is a fucking great feature. Yeah. So
that's great.
In beta, you could do live chat, set up a live chat room, and video is there, but we haven't turned it on. So it'll be audio first. But yeah, we have that, and I think it'll be more aggressively flushed out after our next major release.
Okay, but that's exciting. I can't wait to play with that. I'll make up an excuse to do an AMA just to play with that when videos come out.
I'll jump in.
Are there any features that you can talk about in the upcoming pipeline that can get people?
I think you'll have more of a multi-chain experience. You'll have more of a, every word that comes out of my mouth, it's like there's a whole story behind it. So
it's tough to summarize.
I think the biggest thing is like the edge is, I tweeted about this. Like the edge taught us a lot. Taught us so much about Discover. Taught us so much about the technology of the IC, and we've come to the next iteration of our architecture. We've been running it now for about 2 months, 3 months, maybe more. And so far, like every time a problem happens, it's been like, oh, it's such an edge case. Nothing tremendous though, and solved it quickly. Solved it within like 10 minutes, So we'll probably have more to talk about it in the future, but it's a much faster Discover, a much more robust version of Discover.
And that's important because you talked about like what would it take to scale, like what do you call it, enterprise grade Web3 social, right? Yep. Like what would it take to scale to millions of users? Like that's I think you've positioned yourselves well because you're so focused on that. You're not letting anything get in the way, and ultimately it has to be achieved. Like if the success scenario can't be technically achieved, like then what are you even doing? Like you can't even actually achieve it, right? But I think you've got the best shot because you're definitely getting there. I mean, I think it's the fastest, most performant platform that I've used in Web3 so far.
Thank you. And I think the big thing is like we're non-financial system. Like, millions of dollars are not truly lost if a post or comment is doesn't have like 30 40 validations or something like that, right? Like we can confirm a certain amount of transactions or confirm a transaction and know with like absolute confidence that it was signed by this private key, and those things will change over time, but like we'll have more information about like how this architecture works in upcoming in the future, but not in the too far distant future. We got to get it out.
All right, I'm excited. Then Talexi Banti asked, how do you plan to meet more audiences and creating awareness about this business? So I guess just about like general platform growth, like how are you going about the marketing, I guess?
Yeah, we have a huge marketing campaign coming up. It's heavily focused around growth inside of Web3. And we tried the whole Web2 growth angle and trying to, but like we just can't cater to a Web2 audience. Like a Web2,
Yeah.
like we have to make it simple for a Web2 audience to onboard and to discover. That's obvious. But like if a Web2 user is not even bought into Web3, like what the hell do they even care? Like they definitely do not care about Web3 at all. You know, it's like they've got to at least have some sort of buy-in to Web3. And like Web3 is already a like massively growing audience. So it's like we already have this audience that exists. Like how do we tap into a wider Web3 audience has been the bigger question. And like Web2 will follow. Like what, like, you know, you see this in almost every industry, that like every bull market brings over a percent of Web2 to Web3 folks, because you're going to need an entire ecosystem. You need entire product managers, developers, designers, you know, entrepreneurs. You need everybody in almost every sector to come over to make Web3 truly successful. And so there's already a huge Web3 audience, and that's why decentralized social is going to be very interesting in the next market. But like, so it's now addressing those audience and understanding what their wants and needs are. And there's tribalism, there's, you know, all the things of Web3 crypto that needs to be addressed. But yeah, I think we're going to be able to, we have an understanding of how Web3 users want to interact. Now we got to understand how do we like cater better towards a wider Web3 audience.
You know, I think that goes back to one of my earlier questions about like, because it's going to take a while for the majority of the web to really care about decentralizations, how are you going about it? It seems like your strategy is to first focus on the ones who do care about decentralization, those in Web3 who already do care, fill the need in that market, right? And then like add value from there. I think Social Graph would add value to Web2, right? So I think that's a great approach. And I mean, it's a good point about like how there's been an increase in Web decentralized social between markets. I think in this next bull cycle, you know, when we go back into a bear cycle, if we can keep more of the people who joined decentralized social, if we can create more stickiness for Web3 itself, right? I think that could be huge. And I think DSocial is going to definitely play a massive role in that, right? If people are not investing in crypto so much, but they're active on the decentralized platforms because they still believe in the use case and the value there, and they have their base there. I think that's awesome. And that's what I've always loved about like Discover, is that you've added like Web3 flavor and features all throughout and made it like really compatible for that niche.
Yeah, we want to go down. You know, at first we were like, oh, maybe we'll, you know, provide better Web2 and mobile apps. Gotta have a mobile app, right? That's what everyone says. Add like how restrictive mobile apps are relative to like the true Web3 experience. Like pretty much if you're making a mobile app, that like goes into the Play Store or, you know, App Store. I'm obviously an Android user. Most likely you're probably not going to be developing a complete web. Your focus is maybe not on
it's an inherently centralized platform. You know? it is.
And PW again, friend.tech, PWA plus SSS. You know, it was really successful. I mean, so I think we'll probably like we rolled out our PWA app. I was actually looking up what other techniques you could use, but we rolled out our PWA app. We haven't put a ton of focus on it. But now we're like, okay, look, it has a huge potential. Let's perfect the user experience and then really push down on our mobile app and see how far we can get it. Because with push notifications they've come to iOS, it's like, you know, we don't have to capture the user's email or their app store ID, or you don't have to trust us whether we do or not. So I think there's going to be a lot of potential there. I do think the mobile native apps have far greater performance experience, but we'll have to continue and monitor the space.
Dude, I mean, you've done such a good job as an entrepreneur, like maintaining progression while also keeping focus on like the right things. And I think that it's a great example to the ecosystem of how to manage those things in entrepreneurship, right? Like keeping the main goal and being flexible with the path, but focusing on the right things along the way, like what's important, like the big decisions, like whether to have a mobile app or not. that's a really valuable perspective, and I think that's useful for a lot of those out there. So thank you so much for just taking the time to share your thinking, share your insights, and be here with us. We really, really appreciate it. We're at the top of the hour, so I've got to do a quick wrap up here. Everyone watching, be sure to join us next week for Mike Schwartz of Origin. He's the founder of Origin. It's really great talk from him about some incredible things that Origin are doing. I learned a lot in that last conference talk that they gave, the stuff I didn't know about Origin, like technologies they've developed. So that's an exciting talk. Be sure to join us. It's next Thursday, the 14th at 5 p.m. CET. And then we've also got our Zelia keyword out there for our ambassadors. It's Web3 Social. And everyone out there, be sure that you, if you aren't signed up on Discover yet, which seems unlikely, but if you aren't, you better go ahead and do that right now. It's right down here. They're going to change the web forever. Thanks again, Rick. And well, everyone out there, I guess fight the FUD and let's stay bullish. Let's do this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for having me. Later.